Hello everyone, we're from HD2 and our group members are Chan Kongwei, Muhammad Zada Irman, Mirsal Alif, Muhammad Rafi Desrino, Edwin Alisa, Matindas, Jonathan Chandra, and Shafi Muhammad Wari. Today we'll be presenting about the topic of logistical and statistical discussion. And so I'm Jonathan Chandra and I'll be presenting the first part of the presentation. So first, we'll be talking about the compulsory tasks that all the home groups has to do. This is the census that we have gathered as the whole class at the time, where the data was filled by 22 students. And here we have identified many different variables, such as average sleeping time, average time of exercise per week, number of consumption per day, weight, height, gender, and age. We collect these data through Google Sheet as um, it was easily accessible by everyone in class. And we actually use this because we think that this is the fastest and the most efficient method of collecting data these days, as anyone can actually access and input their data anywhere and anytime. These are the census variables. The first one is average sleep time per day. So, and the next one is average exercise per week, or like how many exercise they do weekly. Next is dietary consumption per day, or how many times that person eat per day. Then next one is weight, height, gender, and age. And as we're from HD2 and we're doing census 1, we're not going to include gender and age as our variables. And now I'll be discussing the special task that we're assigned to do for census 1. So from the presentation, you can see the graph. It is a frequency distribution table of the average sleeping time, let's say sleeping time, which we can see that the data are diversified with only a few of the data that reach near the average line of 6.5 hours. This pattern that we are seeing might be due to the fact that each one, and every one of us will have different activities. So, for example, some of us might have classes at 8, and some others might have it at 11, which might affect the time of sleep that we have. And I think it'll be explained later on. But we can see how these variables, such as average sleeping time, average daily exercise, and daily dietary consumptions, can also affect someone's height or weight. Research also found that uh, there's an association between shorter sleep duration and risk of overweight and obesity, which is well established for all groups of age. Uh, However, though, more evidence is still currently being needed to establish an association between insufficient of sleep with someone's height.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Rafi Desrino and I'll now be continuing with the presentation. So now we can see in the slide is the bar chart representing the weekly exercise. So the unit for this variable is in days, and we can see that in this variable the data is much more extreme compared to the others in terms of outliers. For example, for data number 7, number 15, 20, uh, it stated that they have, the members stated that they have 4 days of exercise per week, and for number 9, 10, and 11, they have no exercise at all for the whole week, which shows that they are very far from the average line of exercise days per week for the whole class, which is 1.85 times per week. Or maybe if you round it up, it becomes 2 days per week. And now next is daily dietary consumption variable. And we think that this is the most homogeneous data from all the variables, because if you see the average line of 2.3 times per day of dietary consumption, we can see that almost all of the data is falls near the average line, with only data number 11, 12, 13, 14, and 19 and 20 that is above the average line, which is 3 meals per day. So only 6 members of the class have an extra meal per day compared to the other, which only have 2 meals per day. And now we move on to the weight average. But for this data, we decided to further diversify the data into male and female members in the bar chart. As you can see, the blue bars are representing the female and the orange bars are representing the male members. And then, and this data is actually quite a bit diversified, since there are a lot of outliers as well who are far from the average line. For example, you can see data number two is the lowest data with only, if I remember correctly, 41 or 42 kilograms. And there are also data that are well above the average line. For example, number three, almost reaching 90. And then a more interesting fact is that all the female data are under the weight average, which is 66 kilograms. And next, sorry, we move on to the height average. This is another data that's quite homogeneous, with all the data being near the average line. This data is also diversified into male and female members, but this time the male is the blue one and the female is the orange one. More interesting fact about this data is how all the male data fall above the height average line, and all the female data falls under the average line except for one data number 13 is above the average line, which is 164 centimeters. The next slide is basically a summary of all the average of the variables. As you can see on the left one, the bar chart, it basically shows all the variables of the census and their average amount. So for sleeping time per day, we have at the leftmost is 8.35 hours per day, and then exercise per week 1.68, and so on. And consumption dietary per day is 2.26 and 31, and so on. And then for the weight is 65.9 kilograms, or maybe 66 rounded up. And the average height is 168. And the average age for the members of the class is 20 kilograms, or maybe 21. And for gender, since it can be quantified, we decided to use a pie chart to represent the data, with two sections representing the two genders that was found in the census, with the orange one with 7 members being female and the blue section of 12 members being the male members of the class. And now we move on to the center of inclination. So inclination by definition itself means a tendency towards something. So what center of inclination means for a data is whether or not the data has the tendency to incline towards a certain direction. So perhaps maybe uh, all the all the members of the class states that they have uh, the same number of exercise per week. For example, all of the members have 3 days of exercise per week. But uh, in this case of the census, we didn't see that data except for maybe the number of meals per day, which mostly is submitted to as having 2 meals per day. In other data, we only have a lot of outliers. For example, in the exercises per week, where 3 members have 0 exercise per week and 3 other members have 4 days of exercise per week, which are both very far from the average line of 2 exercises per week for the whole members of the class.
All right. So my name is Shafiq, and I will try to answer question E to question H. So the first one is question E. So here we are being asked to determine data spread of all census data results. And we found that the dietary consumption and sleeping hours per day is centrally distributed. And for the average exercise per week, height and weight is discretely distributed. And now let's continue to question F. Make a conclusion sentence which represents the information of all graphic data from census result. So here we found out that the students in this class have similar time or frequency for dietary consumption and sleeping, while they are also having obviously different frequencies of exercise time per week, height, and weight. And next, make a sentence that relates information of census result that connects all of the data graphics. That is the relation between information data on census A, B, C, and D. So we already know that the data shows that the average sleeping hour is 6.5 hours a day, and then the average weekly exercise is 1.85 times, and the average dietary consumption is 2.3 times a day. The average weight is 66 kilograms, and the average height is 164 centimeters. So the data gives us a general insight on the class average sleeping time, exercise time, as well as dietary consumption, weight, and height information. And for question H, we're being asked to explain with inductive or deductive reasoning. I mentioned the type of inductive or deductive reasoning might be used in the drawing of conclusion in task 2. So we think we use inductive reasoning because here we are trying to find a generalization. We're trying to find the average to get an insight on our class height, weight, dietary consumption, sleep hours, and weekly exercise. So in conducting the inductive reasoning, the first thing we do is to observe. In doing the observation, we create the spreadsheet to sort of collect all the data, and then we do the analysis. We do the analysis by calculating the average of the class weight, wake up and sleep hours, and etc. And as well as the central and the distribution of the data. And then we're trying to find the inference of the data. That is the generalization that we can find from the data that we can apply to all of the members of the class. And then we can confirm the result of the data, whether it is suitable or not. That's all from our group. Thank you for your attention.